She bent down and sprayed my service dog right in the face, yelling, "This mutt doesn't belong here!" My dog yelped and tried to crawl back to me, and I froze for a second because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Before I could even say anything, she shouted louder, "I'm calling the cops! You can't have this animal on my street!" Her voice carried across the neighborhood, pulling curtains aside and faces into windows. I just stood there, holding the leash, heart pounding, because this wasn't just a pet, this was my certified service dog. Within minutes, 3 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing. She pointed at me like she had already won. "Officers, arrest him! He's violating HOA rules, bringing dangerous animals into Sunnyside!" My neighbors watched from their lawns, whispering, while my dog lay on the grass trembling. I tried to stay calm even as my fists clenched. She smirked, thinking she had me cornered. One of the officers pulled out a small black book, flipping through pages as if it were gospel. "Illegal pets law," Karen muttered, grinning at me like she'd written the rules herself. The cops stood in a line waiting for the order. For a second, it felt like I was already guilty. But inside, I knew something Karen didn't. I took a slow breath, staring straight at the officer holding the book. He hadn't realized yet what law he was quoting, or how badly Karen had just trapped herself. "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I asked quietly, my voice steady now. She scoffed. "Oh, I've waited for this day. You people think you can do whatever you want. Not in Sunnyside." She laughed, not realizing the storm she had just walked into. Because spraying a certified service dog, that wasn't an HOA issue, that was a federal crime. The officer holding the black book hesitated when I pulled out a small laminated card from my pocket. My hand didn't shake as I held it up for all of them to see. "This is a federal ID," I said calmly. "Registered service animal, protected by federal law." The street went silent. Even the neighbors who had been whispering stopped breathing for a moment. My dog lifted his head slowly, blinking, and the sight of him made my jaw tighten. Karen rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Oh, please. Anyone can print a card off the internet. This mutt scared my grandson last week. I want him gone." She jabbed her finger toward me like she was the law herself. "He's lying. Arrest." "Him already?" The officer with the book flipped back a few pages, frowning. "Ma'am, it says right here, interfering with a service animal is—" He paused, looked at me, then back at her. "A federal offense." Karen blinked, her smirk fading. "What? No, that's not—" She turned to the officers, desperate now. "Don't you see what he's doing? He's tricking you." I bent down, patting my dog gently, letting him know he was safe. My voice was steady but loud enough for the whole block to hear. "You just sprayed a working service dog in front of witnesses and 4 police officers?" Gasps spread through the small crowd of neighbors. One of the officers actually pulled out his body cam, rewinding the footage he'd already captured. He pressed play, and everyone could hear Karen's voice shrieking as she sprayed the bottle. "This mutt doesn't belong here!" Her face went pale. She stumbled back a step, pointing at me. No, that's not fair. He provoked me. He's dangerous. He's lying about everything." But her words didn't matter anymore. The cops had all the proof they needed, and I could see it in their eyes. They were done playing by her fake HOA rules. I straightened up, meeting her panicked stare. "You wanted me arrested, Karen, but the only person going to jail today is you." Karen's mouth dropped open as the officer nearest to her stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The sudden click of the metal locking mechanism made her flinch. "Wait! What are you doing?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "I'm the one who called you. He's the problem, not me." She tried to back away, but another officer blocked her path. "Ma'am," the sergeant said firmly, "you just assaulted a federally protected service dog. That is a criminal offense, punishable under federal law. You're under arrest." Her face twisted with rage. "Assault? Are you kidding me? It's just a dog." The entire block erupted in gasps. My neighbor from across the street yelled out, "That's not just a dog, Karen, that's a service animal." Others started murmuring, some even pulling out their phones to record. For once, the eyes of Sunnyside weren't on me, they were on her. Karen spun around, desperate. "You can't arrest me! I'm the HOA president! I make the rules here!" That was the moment the officer with the black book snapped it shut. His voice was cold and clear. "Your HOA rules don't stand above federal law. And impersonating authority to harass residents? That's another charge." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, and she screamed, "This isn't over! You'll regret this! You all will!" Her voice echoed across the neat little lawns, but no one stepped forward to defend her, not one neighbor. As they led her toward the squad car, my dog leaned against my leg, still trembling, but safe. I knelt down and whispered, "It's okay, buddy. She's not going to hurt you again." For a split second, Karen twisted back, her eyes burning with something darker than anger. It wasn't over. Not in her mind. And that glare told me she still had something up her sleeve. They were halfway to the squad car when Karen suddenly jerked her shoulders forward, trying to twist free from the officer's grip. "You don't understand!" she shrieked, kicking at the grass. "I know people. I'll have your badges for this." The officers tightened their hold, but she wouldn't stop thrashing. Neighbors moved closer, recording every second on their phones. And then she spat out the words that made my stomach turn. "Call my lawyer, Judge Wilkins. He'll shut this whole thing down." The sergeant froze mid-step. For the first time, the officers glanced at each other, uneasy. A judge? That wasn't just neighborhood bluster. Karen was actually connected. My pulse quickened as I realized she wasn't bluffing. This woman really thought she had the system rigged in her favor. She smirked through her sweat, lifting her chin even with cuffs biting her wrists. "See? You're all making the biggest mistake of your careers. Once Wilkins hears about this, he'll have me out in an hour and all of you fired." The neighbors murmured nervously. A few even lowered their phones. It was the kind of claim that could scare people into silence. But not me. I stepped forward, my voice cutting sharp through the tension. "Funny you bring up Judge Wilkins," I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I could feel Karen's glare stabbing into me. "Because I already sent the footage to someone who outranks any HOA president, and any friendly judge you've got in your pocket." The sergeant turned his head toward me. "Who'd you send it to?" I met his eyes. "The U.S. Attorney's Office." The entire street went dead quiet. Karen's smirk shattered in an instant, her face draining of color as the weight of what I'd just said hit her. She shook her head violently. No, you didn't. You're bluffing." But deep down, she knew I wasn't. Karen's confidence cracked like glass. Her eyes darted around, searching the crowd for someone, anyone, to back her up. But instead of support, all she saw were neighbors holding up their phones, whispering, shaking their heads. For years, she'd ruled this street with threats and fake notices, but now every camera lens was aimed straight at her downfall. The sergeant spoke again, firmer this time. "Ma'am, you're already in custody. Threatening officers with influence won't help you." But Karen wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice rising in a desperate shriek. "Judge Wilkins will bury you all. He's a personal friend. He owes me. I'll have every single charge erased." The officer holding her arm actually chuckled under his breath, then pulled a radio from his shoulder. "Control, run a quick check on Judge Wilkins' docket," he said calmly. A pause. Static. Then a reply crackled through. "Copy that. Judge Wilkins is already under federal investigation for bribery. U.S. Marshals are involved." The crowd gasped. My jaw tightened. Karen froze like a statue, her mouth still open mid-protest. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. That's not true. He promised me." The sergeant didn't even look at her. He just gave the order. Transport her. Add obstruction of justice and conspiracy. This just went federal. As they pushed her toward the squad car, Karen lost it completely. "No! This is my neighborhood! My rules!" she screamed, kicking against the pavement. But this time the crowd shouted back. "You're done, Karen," someone yelled. "About time," another neighbor added. Phones stayed up, recording her as she was shoved into the back seat, her face red and streaked with sweat. The same woman who once taped fake eviction notices to people's doors was now banging her head against the glass of a police cruiser, powerless. My dog leaned against me again, calmer now, and I whispered to him, "Justice takes its time, buddy, but it always shows up." And in that moment, I knew she wasn't just losing her power over me, she was losing everything. As the squad car door slammed shut, Karen thrashed inside, screaming through the glass. Her muffled voice carried across the cul-de-sac. "You'll all regret this, every one of you!" But instead of fear, the neighborhood answered with something I had never seen before: laughter. One of the dads from down the block raised his phone high and shouted, "Smile for Facebook, Karen!" The crowd chuckled, and someone else added, "More like goodbye, HOA Queen." For the first time in years, the people she'd terrorized weren't hiding behind curtains. They were standing shoulder to shoulder, united against her. Mrs. Ramirez, the elderly woman who once cried when Karen fined her for illegal flowers, stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "We're not afraid of you anymore," she said, staring at the squad car. "Not after this." A cheer rose up, soft at first, then louder as others joined in. I stayed quiet, just holding my dog close, but inside I felt something shift. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen's arrest had broken a chain over the entire street. The sergeant turned to me. "We'll need your statement," he said, his tone respectful now. "And the footage you mentioned. This case is going way beyond local." Before I could answer, a neighbor called out, "Hey, show him the notice, the fake HOA letter we put on your door." Another neighbor ran up, waving a stack of papers. "She's been forging signatures for years. We've got proof." The officers exchanged a look. One muttered, "This is bigger than we thought." Karen saw it too, through the glass. Her eyes widened in panic as she realized it wasn't just one charge anymore. It was everything unraveling at once. And though she banged on the window, screaming for release, her voice was drowned out by something she couldn't control, the sound of her neighbors cheering for her downfall. Blue and red lights still pulsed. Across the street, when a black SUV rolled up, darker windows, no sirens. The kind of vehicle you knew didn't belong to local cops. Two men in suits stepped out, badges flashing in the light. The crowd fell silent instantly. These weren't HOA enforcers, and they weren't regular police. The sergeant straightened. "Federal agents?" One of the men nodded, his voice calm but cutting through the air. "U.S. Marshals. We'll be taking custody of the suspect." He glanced toward the squad car where Karen had gone from rage to visible panic, her forehead pressed against the glass. "We've been watching her network for months." The sergeant handed over the paperwork without hesitation, and the marshals pulled Karen from the back seat. The moment the cuffs clinked as they transferred her custody, she exploded again, screaming, "This is illegal! You can't do this to me! I own this neighborhood!" The marshal didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, you don't own anything. You're being charged with harassment, forgery, conspiracy, and obstruction, and that's before the federal count for assaulting a service animal." Her legs buckled. The sight of Karen, the woman who once strutted porch to porch like she, was queen of Sunnyside, now sagging in federal custody, drew cheers and applause from the neighbors. Phones were everywhere, flashes popping like fireworks. I crouched beside my dog, stroking his head. "She's finished, buddy. You're safe." Now. His tail thumped weakly against the grass, and I could feel some of the tension in my chest finally loosen. Karen shrieked one last time as they loaded her into the SUV. "This isn't the end! You'll regret ever crossing me!" But the heavy dock shut, sealing her voice away. For the first time in years, the street was quiet, peaceful. The marshal turned back to me, his expression softening just slightly. "You did the right thing. People like her. They always think they're untouchable, until they aren't." He gave me a nod before stepping back into the SUV. And just like that, the car pulled away, carrying Karen and every ounce of her fake power out of the neighborhood for good. The night settled in quiet after the marshals drove away, leaving only the hum of crickets and the low chatter of neighbors who, for once, weren't whispering in fear. Instead, they stood in little groups, laughing, swapping stories of every petty rule Karen had ever used to control them. The street that used to feel tense and heavy now felt alive, free. I sat on the curb with my dog's head in my lap, rubbing gently behind his ears. He was still a little shaken, but his eyes looked up at me with trust that never wavered, not even in the middle of all that chaos. My chest tightened as I whispered, "Nobody will ever lay a hand on you again. Not while I'm breathing." Mrs. Ramirez came over, setting a soft hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking, "for standing up when the rest of us couldn't." Behind her, other neighbors nodded, one by one. For years they had lived under Karen's shadow, but tonight, it felt like the weight had finally been lifted. I looked around at them. The families, the kids playing barefoot in the grass again, the veterans standing tall, the couples holding hands on their porches, and I felt something deeper than just relief. I felt pride. Not just for myself, but for everyone who refused to be bullied anymore. Taking a slow breath, I spoke loud enough for them all to hear. "I didn't fight for this country so someone with a fake rule book could tell me I don't belong on my own land. We all deserve better. Tonight proved that." The crowd clapped, a few people even cheering. My dog gave a soft bark, almost like he was adding his own voice to the moment, and the sound drew smiles across tired faces. As the moonlight washed over the quiet street, I finally stood, leash in hand. Karen was gone, but her downfall left behind something stronger than any HOA notice or fake authority: community, real community. And for the first time in a long time, Sunnyside finally felt like home. And deep inside, I knew this truth would stay with me forever. Justice may take its time, but when it comes, it's worth every second.